Hi everybody, it's Valerie here from Moms Mean Business. Welcome back. I'm delighted today to have Yvonne Smyth from This Parenting Adventure. Yvonne is a family coach, a parenting coach, a life coach, and somebody I follow religiously on Instagram. Her posts are just so inspiring, and it's like you've been reading my mind, Yvonne, in your posts lately. It's absolutely incredible, and I love them. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for coming along today. I can't wait to hear your tips because I've done one of your courses before and I absolutely loved it. Brilliant. And it really opened up how I am raising my second child. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. And thank you for your kind words. And you're always there on Instagram, and it's it's so lovely for me too to have people like you who actively engage with my content and who we're always chatting and all of that. So that's lovely. Now, I haven't had loads of time to prepare a lot of stuff for today because I'm on my own with two young kids. So like the rest of us, it's kind of winging it a bit, but what I thought I would do would be to sort of share a little bit of my journey to sort of help people understand how I have come to this whole ethos or idea of parent coaching, to share a little bit about what conscious parenting means to me, in particular my interpretation of it, and then to share one very sort of specific tip that I'm going to give you all that might be really helpful during these times with our children. And then I just thought I would let you ask me questions, as in, what are people struggling with in relation to parenting at the minute, in relation to their kids? And I can just answer questions until our time runs out, if that works for you.
Fantastic. Love it.
Okay. Right. So I always wanted to have children. It was, my part of my life purpose, I felt, was to have kids. And I didn't meet my husband, who's now my ex-husband, but that's not relevant, until I was 38. So I had my kids sort of quite late, 39 and 40. And, was so thrilled to become a mum. And I think in the early days, once I sort of got over the, I suppose, sleep deprivation and got into routines and whatever, I found things pretty easy, or okay. But once the kids got to be 3 and 4, I suppose, or even 2 and 3, I started to find things a lot harder. Whenever they had their own mobility and their own will was really probably the thing that got me. Their own will and the ability to say no. And it was no longer about me being in control of them. They had their own ideas and their own, and I really struggled. And I, like so many of us, just sort of started following the traditional, more mainstream parenting advice around timeouts, and punishments and consequences and even rewards and all of that. But I was really dissatisfied because it wasn't working for, I feel, yes, you can control your kids with rewards and punishments if that's what you want to do. But what I felt was that it wasn't doing our relationship any good, and it didn't feel good for any of us using these sorts of strategies. And I kind of thought, what, there has to be something else. There has to be something that's going to work better for me and for them, and that isn't going to feel like an uphill battle all the time. And like you were at loggerheads all the time, like it was sort of just me against them a lot of the time. So I started sort of ferreting around to see, was there anybody saying anything different, and I came across Dr. Shefali Sabri, who I know, Valerie, that you are a fan of. And I came across the whole concept of attachment parenting, which again, I wasn't aware of. Again, Valerie, I know you're very aware of that and have used that very much with Ziggy from the very beginning. I wasn't aware of attachment parenting, didn't know anything about it. I came across that as well. And although I hadn't done the baby wearing and the co-sleeping and all of that sort of stuff, the ethos of attachment parenting around the attachment relationship really resonated with me in terms of the type of relationship I wanted to have with my kids. And I came across as well Alfie Kohn, Unconditional Parenting, which is another. So, you know, I'm going to actually show you sort of these are the 4 books that changed my life. This one, which is attachment focused parenting by Daniel Hughes. Now, it's kind of hard enough read that, and I've only read it once, but it was very, very informative for me at an early stage of understanding what attachment parenting was about. The Conscious Parent, Dr. Shefali Sabri. Her other book, The Awakened Family. And this is one of the most amazing books I've ever read, Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn. Now, Unconditional Parenting is about, Alfie Kohn introduced me to the idea that rewards are as damaging as punishments. And when I read that, first of all, I was like, what? What the flip? Okay, I want to get rid of punishments, but what about rewards? Surely. But actually, his ethos is, and I very much bought into this, that rewards and punishments are 2 sides of the same coin, because they're both manipulative. They're both trying to make our children be a certain way or do something, and the messages that our children get are, I'm not okay as I am, that your love for me, mummy, is conditional upon me behaving like this and not behaving like this. And when you reward me for doing this, that tells me, oh, you love me when I do that. And when you punish me for doing that, oh, you don't love me when I do that. And although, you know, some people will say that if you raise your kids to understand that it's not you that I don't love, it's the behavior I don't love, I don't buy into that crap either, because children don't get that. Children don't understand the difference between you don't like what I'm doing and you don't like me. Okay, so it doesn't make any difference. So we have to get away from this whole rewards and punishments. And I have now, for the most, like my kids are now 9 and 10, and I probably started discovering this stuff when they were about 5, maybe, probably wasn't until they were about 5. And now I parent for the most part, although I slip into, you know, control-based, you know, fear at times as well, but for the most part, without rewards and punishments. There are no rewards and there are no punishments. Insofar as I say, occasionally I flip and I go, right, I'm taking that tablet away from you, or you'll get no iPad tomorrow. But I always actually go back on that. If I ever do that, I always later on go, sorry guys, that's not how we live. I just got triggered in that moment, and we know that we don't punish around here. That's not how we live. So that was very instrumental for me. Now, conscious parenting is, you know, if it's not something that people have heard of before, when I came across it, first of all, it seemed so radical, because conscious parenting flips the whole parenting paradigm on its head. And whilst mainstream and traditional parenting is all about, how do I get my child to do A and not B? How do I get my child to cooperate? How do I get them to stop having tantrums? How do I get them to behave like this and not like this? How do I fix my child, essentially, is what mainstream old-fashioned parenting is about. How do I get them to change? How do I get them to fit in with what my idea of what they should be doing and being is about? Conscious parenting flips that on its head and says, how do I get out of my children's way in order that they may thrive into the truest and most beautiful version of themselves? So it is much less about the child as it is about the parent. And from a practical point of view, what that means is, if my child is behaving in a way that's causing me to lose the bat, the question is, what is there in me that is causing me to respond this way? What do I need to do? How do I need to look at myself in order to respond differently to my child, so that I'm not punishing them, I'm not trying to change them, I'm not trying to mold them? And I like to use a metaphor of sort of the sunflower and the oak tree when I sort of talk about our kids. So I'm a firm believer that when our children come into this world, they have an essence about them. They have their own essence inside them, their own knowing who they are. And it's a bit like if you had taken an acorn and you plant an acorn, it will grow into an oak tree. It won't grow into anything else, and nothing you can do about it will turn it into anything else. If you plant a sunflower seed, it will grow into a sunflower. So the sunflower seed has within it a blueprint for a sunflower. An acorn has a blueprint within it for an oak tree. You may also, so your child may have a blueprint for an oak tree. They may have a blueprint for a sunflower. They may have a blueprint for a weeping willow. So a really sensitive, type of child. And that it is incumbent upon us to provide the environment within which our child will become the most strongest, biggest oak tree, the most vibrant sunflower, or the beautiful, delicate, intricate willow tree, weeping willow tree. But we as parents fall into the trap of, I want all my children to be either oak trees or sunflowers, or I want them to have a bit of both. And no, I don't want them to be a weeping willow, or don't want them to be a dandelion, and that's where we end up struggling, or that's certainly where I ended up struggling as a parent, because I was wanting my children to be a certain way, and it was going against who they were. And also, my two children are completely different, like completely different. I have probably one who's a bit more like an oak tree and one who's a bit more like a weeping willow. I have one child who's extremely sensitive, and I have one child who appears to be a lot more robust and stronger. But neither of those is right or wrong. That's just who they are. So when my child, if for example, I'll give you a good example. I'm very sensitive, and when I was a child, that was not allowed, to cry for no reason, in inverted commas. So I kind of disowned my sensitivity because I learned that it wasn't worthy or valid or whatever it was. And when I see one of my children being extremely sensitive, I can get triggered into fear, into that old paradigm of it's not okay to be sensitive, because that's how I've been conditioned. So when one of them cries at seemingly nothing, and I feel something rising in me, which is about, that's not about fixing the child, that's about fixing my response. Okay, so it's about seeing that that's because there is something in me that is somehow feeling that that's not okay. And what I have to do is grow as a human to be accommodating and flexible and accepting and unconditionally loving my children exactly as they are. Okay, does that make sense?
That is such an amazing analogy, and I think it is just so important for people to hear that and know that, because like my first child is like hitting 23 years of age, and my second child is hitting 3 years of age. And as I raised her, and I've raised them very, very similarly. They're very different personalities, but I raised them very similarly. And how I do that, like I would have been attachment parenting with my daughter, who's nearly 23. I wouldn't have had a clue what that was. I was known as the odd person who raised their child differently. And I just always went with my gut instinct. Now, I would not always, that would be a lie, because obviously social conditioning would have impacted me, and being so young, I would have been afraid to question it very much back then. So it would have definitely had a certain impact on it. But for the most part, if something didn't feel right to me, then I just brushed it away and did it the way I felt was right. And I think people need to know that so much, because there is all that social conditioning around parenting and around controlling your children and raising them to behave themselves and be how they're told to be. instead of embracing who they are. So for me, I always go, I listen to what everybody has to say, because you learn something from everyone. But if it doesn't feel right for me, then that's the bottom line. That's how I parent, is I go on my feelings all the time. That's my compass for parenting. But I love the analogy about the trees. That's just so beautiful. And all the children are, and even the adults, we need to embrace that as well. Like, it's not just the children, it's allowing the adults be who they are, because so often we don't do that either.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point, Valerie. And God, I think that's amazing that you were parenting in that way, with Zoe as well. That's fantastic. Absolutely amazing. And you are obviously, you talk about going with your gut feelings and going with your feelings. You must have been therefore in touch with your own knowing and your own essence. Whereas, if I'm honest, I wasn't. I was so conditioned out of my own essence, not in a negative way, just in it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
My mom is in her mid-80s. My dad was 89 when he passed away, whatever, the year before last. It was a generational thing. Emotions were not, valued or validated, so it wasn't that I was in any way abused or in any way neglected, but it was just a generational thing. And I grew up very disconnected from the truth of myself, which is that I am very sensitive. I didn't know how to listen to that part of me, because I had switched it off. I had disowned my own sensitivity, my knowing, my gut feeling. I didn't have it. So that's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Valerie. So, okay, so that's sort of, now it's not easy to parent consciously. It's hard, because it requires us at every point to question ourselves, so it's about going, right, okay, as I say, what is there in me that is causing my reaction to this? And it has required for me a huge amount of understanding of my past and my conditioning and parts of myself that I've disowned and everything else. But what it is it's a relationship, and this is all attachment parenting as well. Parenting is not a managerial task, and it's not a managerial activity. We think it is. We think we're here to manage our children, tell them what to do, instill values in them, which is not a bad thing, but equally we have to accept that if they have different beliefs and values, we have to allow them to have them. But we think that we're in control. We think we're expected to be in charge. And as you quite rightly said, Valerie, our children have to behave themselves. Oh, what does that even mean? And you're a good parent if your children are well behaved. That's, and it's complete and utter rubbish. But it took me time to sort of feel into that. And yes, to feel into my own knowing, and to not follow what other people are doing or saying, or and just to, like you say, sort of feel into your feelings. And it requires us to let go of, it requires us to be vulnerable. It has required me to be very vulnerable in terms of turning around to my kids and saying, you're right and I'm wrong. And you are allowed to do that or be that way or whatever, because I am not you and you are the boss of you. And I'm not the boss of you. That's not who I am. I'm here. And I talk to my kids now about how we're all, a quote from Ram Dass, who I think probably, Valerie, you probably know, we're all just walking each other home. We're all just walking. I'm walking my kids home, but they're walking me home, because they're walking me back to myself. And I like to think of it of I am, if I had an organization chart, I'm not up here and my kids are down here. We're on the same level. They're teaching me how to be a human. I'm teaching them. We're holding hands, walking in the same direction. I'm not ahead of them, leading them, and I'm not behind them, pushing them. I'm just sitting beside them. I'm accompanying them. I love the word accompany. I talk about, I'm accompanying my children on their journey. They're not accompanying me on mine. They're not here to fulfill my my unmet needs, or the things that I didn't get to do as a child. Or it's not about going, oh well, I loved gymnastics and horse riding, so you should love gymnastics and horse riding. Or I would like you to be sporty. Or it's about dropping expectations and allowing our children to be who they actually are, whilst providing, obviously, a nurturing environment and a connected and attached relationship. So that is that piece. So I'm going to share one thing that, particularly at this sort of, in these difficult times when we're perhaps spending a lot more time with our children than we would normally do, particularly if you've school-aged children, they're at school, or even somebody else looked after a child and you went somewhere, and particularly it can be hard because our children are there all the time when we're trying to either work or cook or tidy up after dinner or whatever, and looking for our attention. Now, what I always say, whenever we think our children are attention seeking or looking for attention, they're not. They're looking for connection. If we reframe that attention word to connection word. So one thing that we can do that is very, very effective with children of all ages is special time. And special time is simply where we give our children a period of time in the day, and the length of it will to some degree depend on the age of the children, and also how many children you've got and what time you've got. But a minimum of, say, 15 minutes, for example, with a child, where it is their special time. It's one-on-one time. So if you have other children, and like me, you're on your own, because I'm a single mum, the other one is put in front of the TV or an iPad or whatever. There's no guilt involved in this. And the child has, say, 15 minutes of child-led play. That's really important. So the child decides what you're going to do with special time. And you do it, you have special time with your children every day, and you schedule it in. So you tell them when it's going to be, so they know when it's going to be. They can look forward to it. They know that it's one-on-one time they're going to get with you. They can plan what they're going to do, and you basically have to do whatever they want. So in my case, that could be, I have to have a Nerf war, even if it's something I don't want to do. Actually, I quite like having Nerf wars. I don't mind those. But Lego, I hate playing with Lego. Okay, it's so boring. I don't mind building Lego, but playing with Lego figurines. But if that's what my child wants to do, that's what I do, because the child is in charge of this. And what happens, two things happen when you do special time and child-led play, is it fills their connection cup. Okay, so it fills up their cup of connection, which means that they are more likely to be able to play independently for a decent period of time after you have done this special time. Now, the age of the child will obviously depend. If you're a very young child, that period, that window is smaller, but an older child, it will be a bit bigger. The other thing it does, which is particularly relevant for the times that we're in, is it gives the child agency or control. At this point in time, none of us have control over what has happened in terms of our privileges and our freedom being taken away. Our children can't meet their friends, they can't go to the cinema, they can't do all the things they normally like to do. So they're not in control, and that impacts them, and so when we give them back some control, then that meets that need to have some agency. We all have a need to have some agency over our lives, or some control, even children. So you give them that control, they do whatever, we do whatever they want to do, and you set a timer. So if it's 15 minutes, you set a timer, and they know when the timer ends, that's it, finished. So that is a very, very effective tool, particularly, as I say, if you're trying to get things done. And and it is, because what happens otherwise is, no matter what you do, your children are, Mummy, can you look at this? Mummy, can you come here? Mummy, can you? And inevitably what happens is, you're in the middle of something and you keep having to say no, 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 which is not nice for children, and I don't feel nice when I do that either. So that's one sort of little tool that we can use, but it's highly effective. So that's that.
It's brilliant. Even if it's whatever they want, like reading a book with them or whatever it is, cuddling up on the couch, even if they want TV for those 15 minutes, but just to be cuddled into you, whatever it is that they want. I love that. I really love it. It's something I started practicing with Ziggy. I wouldn't have done it with my first child because I wouldn't have known about it. But I think I would have done it naturally. Maybe not every day, but naturally. But like that, you hate playing with the Lego. I used to hate playing with dolls. Drove me insane. But I'd play all different things with dolls. That was a killer. But yeah, spending that quality time with them is beautiful. And when they're old enough to understand that it is a time limit that they have, like for me at the moment, Ziggy wouldn't get that concept at all. So it's a case of I have to involve him in all the things that I'm doing. He wants to be involved in them. There wouldn't be no dinner cooked if he didn't participate in it. He does sit on the floor sometimes and play, but generally he has to participate in it. And I love giving him that control and freedom, because I didn't do that with my daughter. Like all the cooking and stuff, I wouldn't let her do it. I was like, no, I have to do it. I'm the adult and I do it. And I feel tremendous guilt, but I was doing the best I could at the time. I'm aware of that. But with Ziggy, like, he just takes over, and it's wonderful. It can be frustrating if you're in a rush, but for the most part it is wonderful. And I love that it's been more embraced, that children are having more of a say now, because it's so important to feel heard. Really, really important.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, yeah, the old parenting thing of, how I was parented was that there's a hierarchy, that if the parent is here, the child is here. And as you say, there are things that adults do and there are things that children do. And, and that's how it is. But that, as you say, it doesn't have to be like that. And I see Ziggy helping you cook and making the smoothies and the juices, and I think it's amazing, And to be honest, I didn't do any of that when my kids were younger. I was very much, no, I'll do this and I do this and you do that. So you're a child and that's you and this is me. And, and again, it takes time as well to, to feel into doing things differently and allowing greater involvement. And I don't always get it right either. And sometimes I just want to do the thing myself because it's quicker. But I do know, actually, I want to go back to something you said as well, Valerie, about whatever the child wants to do, even if it's, curling up on the sofa and watching TV or something. That's really important, because special time is not an opportunity for us to make our children do stuff we think they should be doing that's Instagram worthy, like, baking a cake or, painting a picture or creating something. That's not what it's about. It's not about, showcasing what we want, what we might want them to do or what we think they should be doing. It's whatever they want. And sometimes it's about me sitting with the kids and them showing me something they've made on Minecraft, so that's a really important point. We have to fully accept whatever it is they want to do, even if it doesn't seem like a worthwhile activity or productive or a learning opportunity or creative, or it's about meeting them in their world, really, and that's really, really important. And I mean, I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I know that didn't happen to me as a child. I had my world and my parents had a completely different world, and they never, crossed over. So yeah, I thought then, can we just open, questions? Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Anything else you're struggling with your kids, maybe at the minute, or you can unmute.
I'm unmuting there now. Yeah, I think, oh no, not unmuted yet. That one won't unmute for whatever reason. That's okay. Marion, do you have any questions?
No.
I've probably a million in the back of my head, and I don't know who's on the iPhone there, but that's no problem at all. What you said, Yvonne, about walking each other home, that resonates with me so much, because I thoroughly believe that we're not given the children we want, we're given the children we need. And I used to always say that I grew up with my daughter because I was so young having her. And it's only now, having my second child and being in my 40s, that I realize everyone is growing up with their children, regardless of what age they are when they have their children. You learn so much, they open you up so much. It's just absolutely incredible. It's not, when you're looking at it from the outside and you just see this kind of like family unit and this is the way it is, and you know, everything slots in its place, and it isn't like that at all. It's messy and it's wonderful and it tears you open and it hurts, but it's incredible at the same time. And to learn so much from them, to be open to learning from them. And even those who are so rigid in their thinking, they're still opening up as their children are growing alongside them. It's just happening more subtly most of the time, I think. But I believe, like, reading these books, like I wrote down the one there, Unconditional Parenting, because I hadn't heard of that one by Alfie Cohn. And that's something I'd be very interested in reading as well, because the more we're open to it, the more smooth it is. You know, because it's a bumpy ride raising kids.
It's a bumpy ride, and I think that our expectation of it being anything other than a bumpy ride is what leads us to suffering. If we believe that it should be idyllic and Waltonish, the Waltons and whatever, well, that's where we get ourselves in hot water, because it's not like that. And I think as well, what's interesting to me is that what I was struggling with when my children were younger was, cooperation, I suppose, and, and getting them to move from task A to B, or to go to bed, or to eat their dinner, and I was trying to use these, rewards and punishments. Now, I don't use those anymore. And instead, what I have done is focused on my relationship with them. And because now we have a very strong connected bond, what happens automatically is cooperation improves. As connection improves, cooperation improves. So because my children now, not all the time, of course, because we're all human and I'm no different, but most of the time, if you ask them to do something, they'll do it, but not because you're coercing them or saying you're going to punish them if they don't, or you're going to reward them if they do. But when you have a good relationship with somebody, you want to do things that they ask you to do. And actually, I know you're a fan of Gabor Mate as well, Valerie. Yes. And something that he said a long time ago when I watched something of his really struck me. So he said, right, and this is to do with timeouts. He said that if your partner, say, if you have a partner, let's say every day they came home from work, they sat on the sofa and hardly spoke to you, and, had their phone open and were putting headphones in. And if you asked them to do something, they kind of grunted or didn't do it, maybe you asked them to take the bins out, or you're asked to help you with dinner, and they didn't want to do anything you wanted them to do. Would you put them on time out, or would you think there's something wrong with our relationship here? And it's no different for children. If your children do not want to connect with you, to do anything you want them to do, who are ignoring you, or there's something wrong with your relationship. There's nothing wrong with the child, but there's something, and so you putting them on time out, and I've done this. I'm a person who has put my children on time out, so I'm preaching from a place of I've done it all.